All right, let's dive into a story from American history that is, well, it's just so dramatic, and honestly, it's one that often gets overlooked. We're talking about a story of a massive political win, a really brutal and totally illegal backlash, and an unbelievable fight for justice, all taking place right after the Civil War.
32. Okay, that number might not sound like much at first, but it represents this absolutely staggering moment of progress back in 1867. For the very first time in the history of the United States, 32 black men were elected to Georgia's state legislature. I mean, think about that. These were men who had been enslaved just a few years before, and now they were lawmakers.
But, and this is where the story takes a sharp turn, this incredible historic achievement was almost instantly wiped out. I'm talking within days of taking their seats, every single one of them was illegally thrown out of office. So how on earth could that happen? And what happened next? Well, that's the story we're going to unpack. So to really get what's going on here, we have to rewind a bit, right back to the period just after the Civil War. It's called Reconstruction. And for the very first time, black men in Georgia were given the right to vote. Now that one change, that wasn't just a small tweak. It basically kicked the door wide open for a political revolution. And the speed of this change was just wild. The Civil War ends in 1865. Okay, just 2 years later, in 67, freedmen get the right to vote. And by the very next year, 1868, they've already elected 32 of their own to the Georgia General Assembly. That is a breathtakingly fast moment of democratic progress. It's almost hard to wrap your head around. But of course, that kind of progress was met with immediate and really fierce resistance. The white Democratic majority in the legislature, well, they just weren't having it. They flat out refused to accept their new colleagues and immediately started working to throw them out. So what was their official excuse? Well, this is a classic case of twisting the law to justify discrimination. They dug through the state constitution and basically said that because black men were persons of color, they were non-citizens, and because of that, they weren't allowed to hold office. So in their twisted logic, these men could vote for people, but they couldn't be the people you vote for. It makes no sense.
And to make their case seem stronger, they didn't just stop with illegal mumbo-jumbo. They launched these really nasty personal attacks, using flimsy and often totally false accusations. You had Senator A. Bradley, who they accused of seduction, a charge he was later found innocent of, by the way. They claimed Senator George Wallace was illiterate, and Representative Henry M. Turner, they just framed him for completely made-up ethical violations. Let's be real, these weren't legal arguments. This was straight-up character assassination. And when you look at the actual vote to expel them, it just shows you how incredibly fragile their position was. Sure, all the Democrats voted yes to kick them out, but they weren't the only ones. Under what must have been insane political pressure, even some Republicans, the party that was supposed to be on their side, voted with the Democrats. The few supporters they had left just didn't have the numbers to stop it from happening. So kicking them out of the legislature, that wasn't just some political maneuver. No, it opened the floodgates to a wave of targeted violence. For these ousted lawmakers and anyone who supported them, just trying to stand up for their rights now came at an absolutely terrifying price. The Ku Klux Klan went after them directly. Look at this. Representative A. Colby was literally dragged out of his home and beaten horribly. And you know why? All because he asked for military protection for a school. Representative Alf Richardson, he was murdered. These were not random acts of violence. This was a calculated campaign of terror designed to completely crush black political leadership. And this wave of violence, it all came to a head in one truly horrifying event, the Camilla Massacre. Here's what happened. One of the ousted lawmakers, Representative Philip Joyner, led this act of defiance. He got over 200 freedmen to join him on a 25-mile protest march to a political rally. But the local whites in Camilla decided that rally was not going to happen. As the marchers, who were peaceful, arrived in town, they were ambushed. The result was a massacre. 12 people were killed and over 30 were wounded. All for what? For trying to participate in politics? Okay, so the Camilla Massacre and all this constant violence, this was finally enough to grab the nation's attention. The situation in Georgia had gotten so bad, so completely out of control, that the U.S. Congress was basically forced to step in. It became this stark reminder of why federal power is sometimes absolutely necessary to protect people's basic civil rights. Georgia's Republican governor, a man named Rufus Bullock, was furious about the whole thing.
He went straight to Washington and appealed to Congress. And in response to this illegal purge and all the violence, Congress did something pretty dramatic. They made a formal declaration Georgia was now officially unreconstructed. What that means is they basically said, you haven't met the requirements to be a part of the United States again.
And believe me, that declaration wasn't just for show. It had real teeth. Congress passed something called the Georgia Bill. This law was a direct answer to the crisis. And it did something pretty drastic. It put Georgia back under federal military rule. The state government lost its power, and the Army was back in charge.
Now, this federal intervention, it wasn't just some symbolic gesture. Oh no, this was a direct military-backed mission to reverse what had happened and to forcibly reshape Georgia's legislature.
So in December 1869, you have General Alfred H. Terry marching into Georgia with federal troops. And let's be clear, he wasn't there to have a friendly chat or negotiate. He was there to enforce the will of the United States Congress, period.
And what he did next became known as Terry's Purge. Using his military authority, Terry kicked out 24 ex-Confederate Democrats from the legislature, guys who, by law, shouldn't have been holding office anyway. And who did he replace them with? The Republican runners-up from the last election. Just like that, the entire power dynamic in the state was completely flipped on its head.
And this move led directly to the victory they had fought so hard for. With a new Republican majority in place, the 32 black legislators were finally brought back and given their rightful seats. And what did this new legislature do? Well, first, they ratified the 15th Amendment, which guarantees the right to vote can't be denied based on race. And with that, Georgia had finally met the conditions. They were officially readmitted to the Union in July of 1870.
So they did it. They actually won. But, and there's always a but, isn't there? Their return to power was really short-lived. The whole era of Reconstruction ended not long after. So it begs the question, what was the real legacy of this incredible but very fragile victory?
Well, even in that brief window of time they had in office, they left a huge mark. Maybe their most lasting achievement was getting the right to free public education for all children written into the 1868 state constitution. And this wasn't just about building schools. It was about this foundational belief that everyone deserves a shot, everyone deserves an opportunity. That's a legacy that has affected generations of people in Georgia. And to really put their achievement and what was lost into perspective, here's one more number for you: 100. It would be almost 100 years before Black Georgians would see that level of political power in their state legislature again. Think about that. This one brief, shining moment of progress was followed by an entire century of disenfranchisement. It just goes to show you how incredibly fragile democratic gains can be if they aren't constantly protected.
So the story of these 32 men, it's a story of amazing progress, met with vicious backlash, and then a resilient fight for justice. And yeah, it's over 150 years old. But it really makes you think, doesn't it? What does their struggle teach us about the fight to not just gain, but to protect our democratic rights today?